thank you. I want to talk a little bit about this timeline for the audience, so you can see how quick this pandemic hit. It to us, it seemed like it just came out of nowhere, but just so you're aware, there was a doctor that by the name of Dr. Lee, I hope I don't butcher his name, but Lee Hang, and he actually died from this virus. So listen to this. Listen to this timeline. On December 31st, Chinese authorities treated dozens of cases of what they thought was pneumonia, but it was an unknown cause. That was December 31st. January 11th, China reported its first death. And then their media didn't know what the name of the virus was at the time. They thought it was just a regular virus, like a regular flu virus. But what they're saying is it started at a Chinese seafood and poultry market in 2019. This is where it started. So they thought it was pneumonia December 31st. Somebody died January 11th. January 20th, other countries started having confirmed cases of this pneumonia. So China, Japan, South Korea, Thailand, they started kind of confirming then, hey, something is going wrong. The first case in the United States was in Washington State, where a man in his 30s developed symptoms. But again, they thought it was pneumonia. So then you have the World Health Organization, who began to then declare a public health of emergency across the water, so internationally, but not really in the United States. It wasn't until January 31st that the Trump administration restricted travel, because that's when they started to get word of what happened. February 2nd, the first death happened of this virus outside of China. February 5th, the cruise ship that was sailing in Japan, they quarantined everybody. The 7th, a Chinese doctor who tried to alarm us about it, he died, Dr. Li Wenliang. So now he was trying to warn everybody that this was a different strain of like the flu virus. It wasn't pneumonia and it wasn't the flu. So now you have February 11th, this is when they named the virus officially the coronavirus. The World Health Organization proposed an official name for the disease called coronavirus. It's an acronym for Coronavirus Disease 2019. And so they said that they don't want this virus to make any reference of people, places, or animals. It's just a virus that can be, you can contract it, animals can contract it. They're not really saying all of that, but they can in the research that I've done today. By February 24th, it had emerged in Italy and Iran. It was a pandemic over there. Latin America, February 26th. Africa, February 28th. In Nigeria, they had the first confirmed cases. It didn't make it to the United States, where a death was reported until February 29th. So this thing, when I say it spread so quick, it spread quick because then March 3rd was when they started approving the testing. But listen to this. Now, I started talking about this, I said December 31st. Trump did not make this a national emergency until March 13th. But see how quickly this spread across the whole world?
Well, yeah.
And now we're here.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's why, it has kind of increased our fear and anxiety just based on this timeline, right? It went from not really knowing what this is about, not really sure what it's about, hearing one thing, the apprehension of it, till now it's here, and it has pretty much forced us into a lifestyle that has not been what we have been accustomed to.
No, but so now talking about that, Dr. Owens, the lifestyle that we're not accustomed to. What this virus did was instill such fear and anxiety. And I really believe it's almost driven by fear, and I really want to talk to you about that spirit of fear, that spirit of anxiety, that spirit of worry, and even maybe if we can touch on the spirit of frustration, because I think they're all in the same family. And if you can kind of help us unpack that. But what does fear what does that look like? And how has this virus kind of helped fuel that fear?
Yeah, I think what's initially important is to break down the two terms, fear and anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
because while they can occur together, one really doesn't replace the other, right? I think sometimes when you hear people talk about this, they group fear and anxiety together. So I think it's important to really, really break this down for a minute and talk about the natural responses and talk about why this thing may be driven, why fear now may be driving the pandemic, and then how we can kind of move forward. So when we think about fear, right? Fear is our body's natural response to an actual known threat, right? It's a reaction that starts in the brain and it spreads through the body in order for us to make this adjustment to think about the best possible defense that we can have, right? So when we feel threatened, fear revs up in our body in anticipation of this threat, right?
Mm-hmm.
In anticipation of this need to defend and to protect ourselves. So COVID-19, because it's an actual threat to us,
Yeah.
the fear in that is our body telling us we have to respond to this. We have to respond to what's happening, right? There's this panic that comes in because there's an actual threat here. But when you think about anxiety, on the other hand, that's more of the anticipation of the threat. That's fear, right? It's our mind's interpretation of the possible dangers that can arise. So it's more of an emotional state, the what if you will, right? Is so the anxious thoughts, they are driven by the what if thinking. So what if I get the virus? What if my children get the virus, right? What if this virus is here forever? What if close loved ones don't survive for the virus, right? So that's the difference. So while these things may occur at the same time, they're different. So another example is, so let's say you're walking down an empty street alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you start to feel anxious at the possibility of what could happen if someone jumps out and attacks you, right? Now,
Right.
no one is there. It's just a dark street. But your anxiety gives you this what if scenario in your mind,
Yeah.
right? But fear, on the other hand, what that looks like in this example is if someone actually jumps out at you and attacks you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then your body is going to respond. So now when you see that, your fear is activated, right? So with all that being said, I think that's why it's important to note that fear and anxiety is an absolute normal response to what we are dealing with at this time.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. Think about the normal reaction to this virus because it's a very real threat.
Mm-hmm.
The anticipation of this virus is very, very real, especially for the components that we cannot control. Think about the timeline that you just shared with us, right?
Yeah.
The uncertainties of that. So there is a very real component that, yeah, this virus is here. The threat is here. It's harmful. It's unfortunately taking the lives of many. Lots of people are contracting it, right? It's creating a lot of loss. But then there's the anxiousness of it. There's the anxiety of the unknown, the what ifs, what does the future leave? And I think, what's going to be important is to realize that there is a normal component to this so we can face it, right? I hear a lot of people say, oh, just don't fear, just don't fear. Yeah, we'll break that down a little bit, but I think we have to recognize that this is our body's normal response to this threat. We have to face this fear, and we'll talk about ways that we can do this. We have to face this fear and anxiety in order to move forward. Now, see, but the part that becomes abnormal, right? The part that we start to worry is when the fear and anxiety interferes with our functioning.
Yeah.
Right? So there's a normal process to this, right? Okay, yes, there's this threat, there's this virus. Yes, I am anxious about it. But what happens is when it disconnects us from our reality in a sense. It paralyzes us in a sense, right? It prevents us from functioning in our normal activities of daily living, right? It really, really interferes with our normal processes that's when it becomes an issue, right?
Yeah.
That's when it becomes like, okay, wait a minute, it becomes overwhelming now, right? So I think it's important to also know that that's when the fear paralyzes us, and then fear spreads, right?
Yeah.
I'm fearful. I spread that fear over to the people that I love, and they spread it, and they spread it, right? And then what happens is ultimately fear becomes the pandemic in a sense, if you will, right?
Yeah.
The virus is now driven by the fear of it, right? So I think that's what's really, really important, to be able to, for one, determine the difference between the two so we can understand what we are feeling, right? Because when we understand what we are feeling, that gives us a better way to deal with it. And then also, right, to realize that, hey, when it becomes abnormal, when it starts to interrupt us in our functioning, then it prevents us from moving forward, right? And that's the danger in it, right? It paralyzes us and we can't move forward. We can't see past it. So many of us can't see past what this virus is, right? It's hard for us to move past it because the fear has stuck us right here. The anxiety has kind of have us like standing in stone in a sense. It has prevented us from moving forward. So I think that's been the dilemma, right? The prevention of moving forward in this pandemic.
Let me ask you a question. You were talking about the fear factor in all of this. One of the I guess symptoms of fear that I witnessed, that I experienced myself, two questions. The first one, the hoarding of the food when it first happened. Remember when they said, okay, you're going to be on a 14-day quarantine? No, let me even back before that, when you couldn't get hand sanitizer. When they started talking about this, you need hand sanitizer, wash your hands. The hand sanitizer, you couldn't find any. You couldn't find toilet paper. Then 14 days, shelter in place. And people were at the store in groves. I'm guilty of that, where I was telling my husband, I got to go to the store. Do I have enough? What drives that?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about. Well, first of all, let me say this. Some of it, some people, I still don't understand why we was getting all the toilet paper out of the stores, right? I am still wondering about that. But I think what has driven that is this, going over to this anxious component of it, right? Okay. The what ifs. What if this virus comes and doesn't ever go away, and I run out of these things, right? It's the perception of the scenarios we bring in our mind. What if the stores will run out, or what if the stores will be able to close, or if there's be some, all of these what if scenarios that we allow that the anxiety to bring in us. I think that's a part. Yeah, of course, fear. Right, I don't want to go outside, right? I'm going to gather up all my things because I don't want to go outside. But I think it was more so, too, of the what ifs, right? What if I never, if something happens, my car don't. So it's the what ifs that have drove these people to say, I'm going to go in the store today, and I'm going to rack up on all of this because I don't know what to expect.
Right, exactly.
I don't know what to expect. So I think that was a lot of what was driving that what if.
Sarita Pugh, she said, we go into survival mode.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that tonight. Absolutely. There are stages that I believe that we walk through with this pandemic, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit. But yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Because what if, right? So my kids got to eat, we got to have food. What if we're not allowed to come back outside? What if this virus becomes so airborne that if we go outside and not even be around someone, we are at risk? So absolutely, it's definitely a survival mode because we don't know, right? There's so many different accounts of what's going on, right? That drives it too. Who do we believe? You got this news station saying this, you have this news station saying that, this expert saying this. So there's this big what if that kind of drives us into the survival mode. She's absolutely right. Yes.
I know we're going to get into children later, but the more you're talking about fear and anxiety, it makes me think about if the parents and the adults, we're dealing with fear, what has that fear and anxiety done to our babies?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think you're right. So next week we're going to be talking about, well, in 2 weeks we're going to be talking about, parenting strategies that we can give to our parents to help their children cope through this virus. But because you're absolutely right, I think it's very, very important to note to not forget about our babies, right?
Mhm.
I think sometimes we, especially our young ones, right? Even our young adults, but our young children, because sometimes we assume because they are young that they don't have feelings, right? That they don't have emotions, right? But I think it is having a major effect on them. I mean, their little lives have been turned upside down, right? The school is closed for the end of the year. I heard someone say, well, it could be like summer for them. This is not at all like summer for them,
No, it's not. Mm-mm.
right? With learning from home, this is not at all like school, right? To be at home, learning from home, right? Not seeing their friends, don't know when they can see their friends again, right? And I think too, what's important is for us as parents to model a good coping mechanism, right? So if they see us nervous and anxious, then by all means, they're going to be
It's gonna
nervous
be.
and anxious. So I definitely think that our young babies are definitely having reactions, and you can look for it, right? Look for increase of the in irritability, excessive crying. There are things that you can look for that you would really suggest, okay, they're having a hard time with it because they may not be able to articulate their little feelings, right? You can assure them, of course, hey, listen, we're safe at home. This is what I tell my babies. Hey, we're safe at home. Why we
Yeah.
can't go outside, and tell them the truth, right? Hey, there's this virus outside and it's dangerous, but we're safe at home. Mommy and daddy are doing what we can to protect you, right? We're safe at home. But you're right. I think they have very, very real feelings. I think, we need to talk to them as much as we can about it. I think we need to stay in contact with their feelings and emotions as much as we can about it, as much as we can keep them connected to their little friends. I think thinking about our structure surrounding our babies every day, I think all of those things need to be considered because they are just as affected as well.
And that really brings me to a great transition for us to begin to talk about, how we can kind of cope with those things, like the kind of what's next. I mean, the coronavirus is here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're in stay-at-home shelter until May 31st. And even then, our world is different. Like even we just said, this is the new normal, living through this.
Yeah.
And we don't know when we'll be able to go into crowded places. I mean, I just told you, even at work today, you're not allowed in the building without your mask and your
Mm-hmm.
gloves. You can't go in the store without your masks and your gloves. Times have changed. And
Yeah.
so, how can you help us and give us some coping mechanisms and ways that we can deal with that? I want to kind of, there's several categories I want to talk through that because, like the transition to working from home and even, talking through, you know, what's next for, ministries, what's next for school year. You kind of brought it up and like, what can we do? I know as a woman of God, we have the word of the Lord, but just talk through some of the things that we can do.
What I think one of the things that, well, bottom line is just has to be a mindset shift,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's just the bottom line into it. There has to be a mindset shift to how we come into perceiving
Mm-hmm.
this disease, right? To perceiving how we're going to come out of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because although I mentioned fear is a normal response, we choose how we can respond to it, right? We can feed our faith over this fear,
Yes.
right? We can absolutely do that. But again, it has to be a mindset shift, right? So for instance, how am I thinking about this stay at home order or this virus that is causing anxiety or fear? Or how am I thinking about it that can cause more acceptance and growth?
Yeah.
Right?
That's
Because I can remain in the anxiety and fear if I choose to,
mm-hmm.
right? I can definitely remain in it, but I think it definitely has to be a mindset shift, right? I think so.
Definitely. And when you said that, it made me think about there's things we have to do to change our mind because we have to guard our ear gates, we have to guard our eye gates. Because if we're sitting around all day consuming this, it's definitely going to continue to be in our hearts and our minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's important to really kind of talk about, you said one of our viewers talked about, this survival mode. I think it's important to talk about looking at this, right? So like I said before, there's a truth and a reality about the virus that has activated our fear and anxiety and stress in us, right? That is true, right? Like you said, what's next for school? What's next for everybody? What's next for churches? What's next for businesses? Our new normal in a sense, right? But then also, again, what's the collateral beauty in this, right? So we can look at this pandemic in like 3 stages that we need to matriculate through, if you will. So for instance, the stage 1, survival, right? We started off in survival mode, which is I'm gonna go get all the toilet tissue out of the store.
Right.
Right. I'm gonna get out. And then it turns.
You can't find Lysol anywhere.
Absolutely, right. It turns into I just want to get through it. Right. I just need to get through this because right now it happens so suddenly, right? Everything right now is just running together. Right now I'm like overnight, if you will, forced to work at home.
Yeah.
Homeschool my children. Right. Which, okay, yeah, some parents say, oh, well, that's your job. Hey, I'm not a 2nd grade teacher. Right. I don't know how to do this. Right. So I'm forced to work from home. Right. I need to homeschool my children. Right. We are kind of we're the restaurant. Right. Everything else is close. Everything is happening in our home now, where for some of us, this was our place of safe haven. Like, for instance, our children, they didn't go to school at home. This was a place for them to come and play. And now they come and everything is interrupted, right? So that's the survival stage. I am just trying to get through this without eating up everything in the kitchen for one, right? Right? I am just trying to get through all of these things. I find in this stage of survival, you may be glued to the news, right?
I'm guilty.
Glued, right? Because you need to know about it, right? So you're glued to you're from 7 to 8. You're just glued to the news all day. You're still scared of the uncertainty of the unknown, which causes this panic, right? Again, that hoarding, right, causes that, well, I'm just not going to go outside at all, right? Causes you to ruminate on what could happen, what can go on. You feel probably unproductive, lethargic. You may feel a little irritated, angry, annoyed, worried about everything. So a lot of that is in this survival mode, right? The first stage of it. But then there's also this acceptance mode, right? And I think it's important for us to really, as I talk about these stages, it's important for us to really, really think about us and where we might be. Right? Because we can kind of go back and forth through these stages, right? But I really want us to know these stages so we can kind of see the ones that's benefiting us to most, right? Because when you kind of transition into this acceptance stage of this, you start to realize that there are just some components of these things that are out of my control.
Yeah.
Although survival, you started to realize those things that were out of your control, and it took you into a panic, right? Especially if you were a person that used to order and structure and used to being able to do whatever you want to do. All of that was taken away from us. Our choice, right? Our choice of whether we can go to the movies or out to eat, all of that was snatched away from us. So that set us in a certain stage. But now moving into the acceptance of it is saying, hey, what can I do? Well, what can I physically do about this in a sense? I'm not a scientist. I can't develop a one-shot method that'll make it disappear, right? So it's really the realization that, hey, there are some things that are out of my control, right? But then there's also, but then there's also there's also the realization too that this is a temporary situation.
Yeah.
You said someone had a question?
We did, and it was along with the lines you were just talking about. So Lois Dickens asked, what do you ask? What do you say to people instead of how are you? Because, during a pandemic, people get upset when you ask about them.
Well, I think, this is one of the ways that we are just learning how to do everything new, right? So I think that's a part of still trying to make that normal, right? You know, as much as we can. Just like if I were to call my mom, hey, what you doing? Right? It doesn't have to be oh, how you holding up to this pandemic, girl?
Right.
How's your mood? So I think it's simply as you would have done before, right? Yes, are we in this pandemic? Absolutely. But this is just me remaining connected with you. I mean, maybe instead of call, maybe FaceTime. It doesn't have to be a, hey, I'm checking in on you. It could just be a, hey, what you doing? Right? You know, so it could just be a normal kind of gesture where it doesn't have to seem, because you're right, you know, everybody flows through these stages in different ways, right? You know, so, and everybody responds to pandemics and stressful situations in different ways. So we don't know how the next person is responding to something, right? You know, so sometimes people may not want to, you know, kind of have interactions with other people, right? You know, because this is how they are responding to it. But I think that's a component that, you know, we can just kind of talk. Hey, if we talk on Fridays every week, hey, I'm gonna still continue to talk to you on Fridays. Hey, week. How's your day going? You know, not necessarily in the sense of how you're doing in this pandemic, or if, you know, or let me help you. No, but what you do today? Did you watch something new on TV today? You know, what you do today, right? So to try to not make it so much about this pandemic, to just try to have as much of a normal conversation as you can.
Yeah, I think that you're right. Normalcy, as much normalcy as you can have, is really
everything else is not normal, right?
Right. I do have a few more questions to ask.
Come on, let's take some questions. Absolutely.
Okay, we have Shanita Straw. She has a question. What advice do you have for those who may have lost loved ones and could not be with them because of hospital restrictions? What are some practical coping skills, mechanisms that they can use to get through this time?
Shanita, that is a great question. And we are going to spend our next segment, which is Thursday. That is all that it's going to be about, because it is such a heavy segment. The way that we have been forced to grieve, right? You know, so if you could just hold out to Thursday, because if I get into that now, it's going to take up this segment. But we are going, if you can join us in on Thursday, that's going to be our entire segment, grief and loss associated with this virus. Because you're absolutely right. You know, this has taken, especially our culture, right? This has taken, well, the African American culture, I'll say that, right? The way that we typically grieve has been interrupted.
Oh, yes.
Right? We are normal. What I remember, the first thing that I knew my mother to do when someone had lost a loved one is to take a pan of fried chicken over the house, right? It's to take some food, is to go over and to gather and to hug them. So that has been very much interrupted. So on Thursday, we're going to spend an entire segment talking about that, so we can really, really give these tips, these ideas of how we can press through that.
I do have another question from Tevin Haynes. It says, this e-learning is truly affecting the educators. What is your advice to us to make it through this new normal? How do we adapt to it? And so that's something you and I kind of talked a little bit about yesterday. That's that transition period.
Yeah, I think, again, you know, when I talk about this mindset shift, right, I think that is so crucial, right? Because at first, I can speak from personal experience, because I'm e-learning too. Okay, so I can speak from personal experience. So at first, there was this frustration, right? There was this, oh my God, I can't believe I have to learn these, you know, my own studies online and then teach these children this. And so I can imagine for the certified teachers, right, for the teachers that are actually doing it, how this may be frustrating for them as well, you know. So I think one of the ways to do that is to, one, change your perspective about this, right? How can I be creative in this? How can I even be more creative in this, right? You know, yes, again, because it is something that is so far out of our control, right? There is nothing we can do about it, but there are some things that I can control. Hey, how it is really stressful for me. So, you know, again, we want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves, right? You know, doing the self-care things that we need to do to kind of remain, especially when we're first responding to someone else's, when we're educators. Absolutely. I think it's going to be important for us time to take care of ourselves. But I think too, now is the time, right, to figure out these creative ways to connect with our students, right? And I know that's easier said than done. I'm getting all excited about it, but it's just like, okay, now is the time to think about, hey, what else is it that I can do, right? Because I can't do this. Hey, how can I make Zoom fun? I mean, for my sessions, I have telehealth sessions for smaller kids, and that was also a challenge because it's like, okay, wait a minute, we're usually in the office and we're playing and we're interacting. So what can we do with that, right? So I think one of the things that, Tevin, you could probably start to do is, for one, take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Take care of yourself as an educator, right? Yes, we now, because you're giving and giving and giving, you're emptying yourself. So take care of yourself, right? I know we're working from home, but if you have some vacation days, take them, right? And I know that sometimes you feel bad about that. I needed to, I had started to feel a little overwhelmed with just what was coming in from my clients. It was just so much coming in. And I wanted to take a day, and I felt so bad about that because I was like, oh my goodness, they need me.
Yeah.
Right. So I know, Tevin, as a facilitator, as an educator, you may feel, but these kids need me, but they can do this, but I need to be there for them. But it's almost like the airplane, right? What do they say? Put your mask on before you can put it on someone else. So take care of yourself, gauge how you're feeling every day. And those days when you are not up to it, take a break. Hey, if you still, like I said, if you still have some days that you can take a day, right? Make sure you're taking care of yourself. So that's one most important thing. And then two, just find these creative ways, connect to other teachers. One of the things that's been a beautiful experience for me, I've connected to therapists from Finland, right? I've connected to therapists from all over the world. And we created this group, and we're talking about ways to get through with it. So connect with someone, tell me, connect with other educators. Facebook group has tons of education groups. Connect with other educators that are doing some of the things that you are doing, so you all can come together and help you get through this.
I do have another question for you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
To Sheena Finley.
Hi, Sheena.
She asked, can you offer any tips in dealing with anxiety?
Oh, absolutely. I think, one of the things we were talking about this anxiety, we hadn't got to kind of the tips. So I think, what's going to be important is really kind of thinking about how we broke up fear and anxiety so we can be able to put those in its proper perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Because when you group them together, right, there's a bigger thing that you're trying to deal with, right? So I think what's going to be important with your anxiety, for one, is to start to regulate what you think and how you respond, right?
Yes.
And you do that by figuring out what's making you anxious, right? Is it because I am watching the news every day, right? Because if you're anything like Mother Brackett, shout out, she is watching the 6 a.m. news, the 7 a.m. news, the 9 o'clock news. She's getting the breaking stories from 8 a.m. to 5 o'clock a.m. Right, you're right. She's getting all of the news stories, right? And that may be even unknowingly creating some type of anxiety. So I think it's first to try to pinpoint what's making you feel anxious, right? What is it? Because everything is grouped together at this point, right? It's because I'm homeschooling, I'm working from home, I'm stressed. Is it that? Is it because I'm watching the news all day? Is it because I don't feel like I'm productive? So try to pinpoint what's making you feel anxious, and then start to regulate what you think and how you respond to that. So I think that's going to be really, really important.
That's good. We do have another question.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
For you. It's from Sarita Pugh.
Hi, Sarita.
She asked, how can a frontliner, fit in self-care? She's an essential worker, what she does. And I know we're going to get into that on Thursday.
Yeah.
The grief, but she's there now. How can she fit in self-care for herself?
Yeah. Sarita, I think it is going to be crucial for you to carve in that time, right? And again, it's and I know that sounds so hard because we just need to be there, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes we feel like it's sometimes even guilt that if I'm not here, who's going to do this, right? So I think it's going to be so important for you to carve out that time to de-escalate in a sense, right? So for instance, let's say even if it's on your drive home, right? You may not be able to, let's say you get home, there's tons of things to do. Even on your drive home, how can you wind down then, right? How can you kind of wind down on your drive home, wind down before you get there, and then knowing when you need to take a break, knowing when enough is enough. Like, and I get it, the funeral home business, I can't imagine what you are experiencing, but even in the midst of it, think of a plan, communicate to your coworkers. I think that's important for all the frontline workers to have like meetings to communicate to each other on what we can do when one of us becomes overwhelmed.
Yes.
What we can do when one of us needs to step outside or when one of us needs to go in this room and close the door.
Yes.
It's almost like, I watch SWAT, so it's almost like, what's your safe word, right? When you say pineapples, when you say watermelon, this means I need a break. And being okay to do that. So giving yourself permission, Sarita, to say, hey, I need to take this time off. Guys, I am overwhelmed today. And not without the fear of being judged, without the thought that you're going to be judged, right? Being okay with connecting with someone. Make sure you are staying connected. And I know your frontline, your business is your family business, right? So all of you guys are in there. So you kind of all are feeling the same thing. So connect with them, but connect with people outside of it, right? Do virtual dates, be creative about FaceTiming a friend or meet in a parking lot where you guys could be in the trunk of the car on other side of the lot, right? You're still social distancing, but I think it's going to be crucial for you to give yourself permission to take this time.
Well, that really leads me into our transition of that whole changing your perspective. And then remember, you and I kind of talked a little bit about what is it that you were doing that you needed to stop?
Oh my goodness. When you talked about how our bishop really kind of, the Lord just really used him to kind of almost prepare us for it, right? So we were already in a recalibrate type of mindset.
We were already in that mindset.
Yes. We were kind of already in that. So one of the things to do, again, is changing your perspective, right? Yes, I can sit and remain in the anxiety and fear, but I can also think about the collateral beauty in this, right? I can think about, okay, well, you know what, Lord, it's almost like, if you've ever written something before, how sometimes when you write something on a piece of paper and it's just not what you want, so you just bottle up and start over, right? So one of the benefits to this, one of the beautiful things in this, if you will, is that we now have the time to say, okay, what is it that I can be doing? Right? What is it? Let me think about this. How did I start this first quarter off? How did I start the first year off? What is this? What are some things that I was doing that I potentially need to recalibrate, refocus, realign, right? What are some things that I may need to do, right? Then also it's good to think, what are some things that I'm doing that I just need to stop? Right? It just wasn't working. I was doing something and I kept doing it and it just wasn't working. So I need to stop. And then finally, what are some things that I have not been doing that I need to start? So that's the beauty of that, right? We now have this time to really say, hey, I can be doing something with that.
Yeah. I want to ask you, so we're in stay-at-home shelter. God gave us time to recalibrate. What do you say to those people that feel that pressure that if I don't come out of this with 3 books and a ministry and a business and an album, because I'm just saying an album. I'm telling you, as an educator myself and a business coach, my business is almost booming because everyone's like, I need a book. I need a record. I need this. I need that. And I've really been, I think I've been frustrating my clients because I've been digging deeper. Well, what's the motivation for this? And what do you say to those people that might not, I don't want to say that they're being lazy, but they might not have a record deal. They
may not have a record in their belly, right?
They might not have one.
I think and this is a month, this is the 5th month, you know, I think one of the things that I find myself saying over and over to my client is give yourself grace. Grace. We are in the middle of a pandemic that we have never seen.
Yes.
Do not succumb to the pressures to perform. Now, remember, everybody handles these things differently. Everybody handles the stresses differently. Hey, guess what? Be in the reality of what it is for you, right? You make, so for instance, me, I was working, taking care of my family, doing all these things. So this may be my season to rest. While someone else, this may be their season to be a little more productive in that.
Yeah.
What I think is really being okay with giving it all that you can, right? And gracing yourself when you can't juggle all of this, not conforming to that pressure that, like you said, I mean, and you're absolutely right. Even if you think about social media, I mean, I think I'm signed up for 1 million webinars, right? Because everybody was offering a free webinar, right? And I'm like, oh, I can get educated in this, I can get educated. And it becomes overwhelming because you feel like you have to come out of here with something. But guess what? You may need it to just take a nap. If you understand what I'm saying? If you come out of here restful, because your season may be the last quarter of the year, right? You understand what I'm saying? So if you come out of here restful, that's probably enough for you, right?
Yes.
So I think it's really, really honing into this, what we talked about this before, this beauty of what is it that I'm supposed to be doing? What is it? That way you can grace yourself that, and then don't compare yourself. I can't compare myself, and that's hard too. I'm not going to compare myself to what this person is doing because they're not going to respond to it like I do. They may not have the responsibility like I do. So I think it's really not succumbing to the pressures to perform, embracing yourself. Hey, listen, one day all I can give the world was binge watching on Netflix. That's just all I was able to do, right? Was just binge watch, right? But that doesn't mean I'm just not getting things done or being productive in this pandemic. Hey, we are in a global crisis, and some days may be harder than the other, right? Some days I feel good about accepting, but some days I'm just trying to get by. So I think not conforming to that pressure and giving yourself grace.
No, that is so good, Dr. Owens, and the people are responding to you on Facebook. We have Marquita Barrett said that is a lot of pressure, and she just needed a nap.
Absolutely, a good nap. I had to ask the Lord for a time to nap.
I took a lot of long naps.
Yeah,
I wasn't good to anybody, so I took this time to sleep.
Yeah, and that's okay, right? I mean, I can hold two things. I can take this time to rest, and I can also take this time to be productive.
Absolutely.
Right?
You can do both.
Right? Because what I believe is I'm on God's timeline anyway. I'm not on this world's timeline, right? Where is the fire, right? So I think that's going to be the important part of really settling in your spirit that, hey, I am on God's timeline. Right?
That is good. That's good.
Absolutely.
Bishop says that's good. It's important to discern the specifics of the season and how it pertains to you.
Absolutely.
Isn't that good?
Right?
Good.
Because if I'm thinking about what the bishop was supposed to be doing, I'm going to lose my mind trying to keep up with him. Right? So it's just like, let's not keep up with, be in your reality and what it is that you're supposed to be doing. But remember, that's going to be you choosing to do that. That's going to be choosing this, accepting this, and in this growth phase, and not the fear and anxiety.
Exactly.
Right. That's going to be you choosing that.
Yes, be productive and rest.
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that.
So we have Joyce Hudnail said, if you're feeling pressure in whatever you are doing, you need to rethink what it is that you are doing. There is peace in God. Absolutely, right. You know, one of the things that has been really, really, you know, as we kind of think about this faith over fear, like, you know, feeding our, I don't like to say faith over fear. I like to say feeding our faith, right? You know, yes, I love that.
To feed my faith, right? One of the things that the whole beauty of all of this is if I believe that, because we're believers, so I believe that all things will work out for my good. Now that's a cliche scripture. We hear that scripture all the time, but that's the truth. I love the Lord. I am called according to his purpose. So I believe that all things are going to work out for my good. And if I believe that, I'm not looking for the fear in this. I'm
Yes,
looking for the good in this.
that's
Right? I'm looking
good.
for the good that's going to come out of this because that's what I believe is going to work toward my good. So that's what I'm looking for. But I have to choose to do that. I have to choose to do that. So I'm going to choose to believe that, hey, this is going to work out for my good, whatever it's going to look like.
Whatever it
Yes,
looks like.
we're experiencing losses, all of these things, but I believe that this is going to work out for my good.
I love it. You have Marsha Earl said, "Good job, Dr. Felicia Owens."
Marsha, hi, Marsha.
Aisha has a question. Aisha
Yes.
Williams.
Hi,
She
Aisha.
says, "My issue is time management.
Yes.
How to turn work off and focus on family and vice versa."
Yes, Maisha, I feel you, honey. That is such a good question. I think something really, really practical that you can do is try to find a space within your home. Try to create a workspace, right? Even if it's a kitchen table, right? Try to create a space that is just for work, right? That you have whatever you need from work, which is what I'm assuming a computer, because we all virtual,
Yeah.
right? So you have your computer, you have all of your work stuff. So try to create a space that, and then communicate that to your family. Hey, Clarence, the little ones, right? This is mommy's workspace, right? When mommy is in this space, this is what mommy needs, right? So to be able to do that. And so that way, when you leave that space, you leave work there. Try not to do work in the living room on the couch watching TV. And naturally, because we're comfortable at home, we try to do that, right? Or sometimes I will find myself in the bed working on my computer, right? And it's just like, it's hard to turn that off. But I think something very, very practical is to try to create a space, right? And then give yourself hours. Now, I don't know how some people work schedules are flexible, some people work schedules are not. So, but if you have a flexible schedule, try to create your hours around their school hours. Like, for instance, if your children has a video conference with their teacher from 1 to 3 or 1 to 2:30, or 1 to 2, that's too long for them babies, but maybe 1 to 1:45, and you know that they're going to be busy, then try to schedule some time where you can be busy because the teacher is entertaining them, right? So it's like try to look at their schedule and look at yours to say, okay, when can I do this, right? I know I have to prepare lunch. I know I have to prepare dinner, right? So it's like try to look around your work schedule and create a time based on everybody's time. And that's just going to mean coming together and figuring that out. And it is definitely easier said than done. But I definitely think, Aisha, one of the biggest things you could do is really to create your space. So that way you could, I was talking to Elder Billingsley yesterday when we did the drive-by on the Bishop. And she was like, I go to work downstairs, I get off work, and I go upstairs and go home. Right?
I love it.
But it's creating the space so it can feel like, because if not, everything, Aisha, is going to start running together. It is going to start running together. So be able to create a space for you and then create some time to yourself. Try to keep your babies on a normal schedule as much as possible. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a strict schedule, but as much, try to keep them on structure, so if they need to be in bed by 8:30, sometimes they want to stay up late, but try to get them in bed at a reasonable hour so you can have your time. You can have your time to balance now family time, right, with your husband, so you can have your time. So I think those are just some small practical things that you can do.
So we do have a few comments. D. Rice says, good information, very helpful. Nina Alexander says, you're talking good, Dr. Owens.
Hi, Nina.
Sarita said, this is awesome. Belinda Rivers said, yes, I had to create space for in the house and for work. Aisha says, thank you.
But you have to communicate that space too, right? You have to communicate what you're needing with everybody in the house. I think that's what's going to be crucial when you're there with your family. You have to communicate, right? Hey, babies, mommy's going to be in this room from 8 to 5 p.m. Unless the ambulance is at the door or there's a fire, don't knock on the door, right? Or maybe you can text me, or maybe you can slide a note under your door if you need mommy. You know what I'm saying? So it's really being able to have this conversation with everyone in the house so everybody can know what the expectations are.
That's good. So we're going to wrap up. Your husband said, good job, wifey.
Thank you.
So we have so many people are on. We're so grateful that you guys hung in with us. I'm trying to read as many comments as as I can. You guys have been amazing. Thank you for just hanging in there with our technical issues. But again, like I said in the beginning, we know that the devil is a liar and we win. I'm so grateful to be able to talk to you, Dr. Felicia. Amazing information.
To providers, to people that, if people need to reach out. So reach out. Be okay with reaching out if you need to.
We'll put all those resources on our Rhema Nation page. Thank you guys again for watching. You